They can detain you at work in the morning and have you on a bus, a plane, or at a border by nightfall. That's not a movie plot. That's what mass deportation looks like when a government decides the crackdown is the message. And in 2026, this isn't one isolated headline. It's a pattern. The language changes: returns, expulsions, removals, repatriation, but the effect is the same: large-scale enforcement that moves fast, hits hard, and leaves entire communities holding their breath. Now, I already know what some people are thinking. Good. About time. Others are thinking, that's terrifying. And a few are thinking, this is probably exaggerated. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Depending on where you live, the rules, the pace, and even what counts as a deportation can be completely different, which is exactly why this topic is so easy to misunderstand and so easy to weaponize. So in this countdown, we're not doing rumor culture. We're breaking down where the biggest deportation drives are happening, how they're being carried out, and why the numbers people quote don't always mean what you think they mean. And yes, number one is the most controversial, not just because of scale, but because it's shaping the tone for what enforcement could look like next. Welcome back to the channel. If you like clear, fact-based breakdowns with a little side-eye for the nonsense, you're in the right place. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, then stay to the end, because the final reveal puts everything else in perspective. Number 5. Saudi Arabia. The paperwork trap that turns into a pipeline. Saudi Arabia's deportation machine doesn't always start with a dramatic chase scene. Most of the time, it starts with something far less cinematic: paperwork. A residency card that expired. A job that doesn't match the permit. A worker who switched employers the wrong way. A visa overstay that began as, "I'll sort it out next week," and ended as, "Why is my life suddenly a case file?" Saudi authorities run regular nationwide inspection campaigns targeting violations of residency, labor, and border security laws, and the numbers show how fast this becomes a pipeline. In one reported week, January 8th to 14th, 2026, officials detained 18,054 people in these sweeps, and 14,621 were deported. The breakdown tells the story. Thousands were flagged under residency violations, border security offenses, and labor law violations, meaning it's not one type of person, it's an entire system of categories. And Saudi doesn't exactly do gentle reminders. Penalties for certain violations can include steep fines, prison time, and deportation. Reports have cited fines up to 50,000 riyals, along with jail and deportation for some work/residency-related offenses. Here's why this lands as a paperwork trap. The rules aren't just about immigration, they're also about labor market control. The state is enforcing who can work, where they can work, and under what legal status, in a way that's designed to keep the system, well, system NG. So if you're undocumented or out of compliance, you're not just missing a form. You're treated like a leak in the whole structure. For your audience, the big takeaway is this: Saudi deportations can be less about headlines and more about enforcement rhythm, routine operations that quietly move large numbers of people. It's like an airport conveyor belt. Once you're placed on it, you don't get to decide when it stops. And if you think this is intense, stay with me, because the next countries on this list take mass removal into even harsher terrain, with consequences that don't end at the border. Number 4. Algeria. When deportation looks like a desert drop-off, Algeria's mass deportation story isn't the typical paperwork, airport, stamped passport sequence. A lot of it is expulsions southward, into Niger, through some of the harshest terrain on the continent. Because if you're going to make a point, apparently the Sahara is the preferred punctuation mark. Here's the pattern that keeps showing up in reporting. Migrants without legal status are rounded up, transported in groups, and pushed toward the Niger border, often ending up near a remote desert point that aid groups refer to as Point Zero, before people walk or are moved onward to Asamaka, Niger's border town. The Associated Press reported one operation in April 2025 where more than 1,800 people were expelled in a single sweep, and that expulsions that month topped 4,000 according to the migrant rights group Alarm Phone Sahara. And that one operation isn't the whole story, it's more like a sample. Migrants reported another April 2025 expulsion of 1,141 migrants, including women and children, sent to northern Niger. Alarm Phone Sahara also described thousands deported from Algeria to Niger between January and June 2025, warning about harsh conditions and deaths associated with these pushbacks. Now, the reason this hits differently for your audience is the style of removal. When a system is built around desert expulsions, the threat isn't only you'll be removed. The threat is how you'll be removed. Far from services, far from legal help, far from anything resembling a normal process. It's deportation with a survival element DLC nobody asked for. Algeria is also a major transit route toward Europe, which adds fuel to enforcement. Some expulsions are framed as security and border control. Rights groups frame them as collective expulsions that raise serious legal and humanitarian concerns. So if Saudi Arabia is the paperwork conveyor belt, Algeria is the rugged, no-frills version. Less bureaucracy on camera, more human cost off camera. Stay with me, because number 3 isn't about deserts. It's about families who've lived somewhere so long that deportation starts to look like eviction from a life. Number 3, Pakistan. Deadlines that turn neighborhoods into waiting rooms. Pakistan's deportation drive has a rhythm that feels almost administrative until you look at what it does to people. It's built around plans, phases, deadlines, and categories, like someone tried to turn human lives into spreadsheet rows. And when the policy flips from announcement to enforcement, whole communities start living in a permanent state of listening for footsteps. The backbone here is Pakistan's Illegal Foreigners Repatriation Plan, IFRP, which has targeted undocumented Afghans and different documentation groups in phases. Humanitarian and UN-linked updates describe how the second phase began in April 2025, focusing on undocumented Afghans and Afghan Citizen Card, ACC, holders, with later expansions that increased uncertainty and fear as returns and deportations continued. Reuters also reported Pakistan telling illegal foreigners and ACC holders to leave by March 31, 2025, showing how the campaign is frequently driven by deadline pressure. And the big picture is brutal. The Associated Press reported that at least 1.2 million Afghans were forced to return from Iran and Pakistan in 2025, with Pakistan setting deadlines affecting large numbers of Afghans. What makes Pakistan's story uniquely heavy is that this isn't only about recent arrivals. Many Afghans have lived in Pakistan for years, some for decades. So the emotional punch isn't go home. It's go to a place you may not recognize anymore, if you ever knew it at all. And the downstream impact is real-time. Reuters reported Afghanistan's hunger crisis worsening in part due to mass deportations from Iran and Pakistan, as support systems strain and aid is cut. That's the part viewers often miss. Deportation isn't a single event, it's a chain reaction. So Pakistan's deportations work like a countdown clock. Policy announcements become community anxiety, then enforcement becomes movement, fast, crowded, and often desperate. Now wait until you see number 2, because Iran's campaign adds a new ingredient, massive scale with leave now, urgency. Number 2, Iran. The deadline machine with numbers that bend reality. Iran's deportation story in 2026 isn't subtle. It's the kind of enforcement that feels like a city suddenly announcing, this building is being cleared today. And if you're undocumented, the pressure isn't just legal. It's psychological. It's the sense that the clock is always ticking, even when you're just trying to buy bread. The scale here is what makes people sit up. The Associated Press reported that at least 1.2 million Afghans were forced to return from Iran and Pakistan in 2025, with more than half from Iran, and cited UN figures saying Iran alone deported more than 366,000 Afghans that year. It also reported a peak day of 36,100 returns on June 26, showing how rapidly these movements can surge. On the humanitarian side, Reuters described Afghanistan's crisis being worsened by mass deportations, adding pressure to an already fragile situation, especially as winter bites and aid shrinks. This is where deportation stops being an immigration issue and becomes a national stability issue for the country receiving people back. because millions arriving with little money and few options can overwhelm jobs, housing, clinics, and food systems. What's also important for your viewers, governments don't always use the word deportation. You'll hear returns, repatriation, removals, leaving voluntarily. But when people leave because the alternative is arrest or detention, voluntary becomes a creative writing exercise. And the human stakes are especially intense for women and girls returning to Afghanistan, where rights restrictions are widely reported and feared, making return feel less like homecoming and more like forced uncertainty. So Iran's deportation drive becomes a pressure cooker, big numbers, tight timelines, and a flow of people that doesn't pause just because the border crossings are overwhelmed. Now for number 1. The one driving the loudest headlines, the biggest backlash, and the most visible enforcement scenes. Number 1. United States. When deportation becomes a national spectacle in the United States, deportation in 2026 isn't just policy, it's performance. It's high-visibility enforcement, public controversy, and numbers used like scoreboards by people who would absolutely turn immigration into a halftime show if they could get a sponsorship deal. Reuters reported that by late December 2025, about 622,000 immigrants had been deported since President Trump took office in January, and officials signaled the numbers would rise as enforcement expands. Reuters also reported a major escalation in Minnesota, describing about 3,000 officers deployed in the Minneapolis area as part of the crackdown. That visibility matters. The more public the enforcement looks, the more it changes daily life. Schools, workplaces, hospitals, neighborhoods, because fear travels faster than any government vehicle. There's also the infrastructure behind it. Reuters reported IC detention was at 69,000 people as of January 7, 2026, with numbers expected to rise following a major funding boost. And when detention expands, removals often follow, because the system is being built to process more people faster. What's unique here is the political framing. You'll hear the language of public safety, order, and jobs, and you'll also see massive protests and institutional backlash. In Minnesota alone, Time and The Guardian reported large-scale protests, including an economic blackout action fueled by outrage over enforcement tactics and a fatal shooting tied to an immigration officer. And here's the twist that keeps your content credible. Deportation numbers can be debated, definitions vary, and comparisons across administrations can be messy. Reuters has noted how totals can be influenced by border dynamics and how deportations are counted. That's why your audience needs context, not just outrage. So yes, the US earns number 1, not only for scale and ambition, but because it's turning deportation into something people argue about at dinner like it's a sports rivalry. We are down to number 1 through the countdown. Thanks for watching. Today we broke down how mass deportations in 2026 can look totally different depending on the country. From paperwork-driven enforcement, to desert expulsions, to deadline-led crackdowns, to high-visibility operations that reshape everyday life. Now your turn. Which country's approach shocked you the most, and what do you think happens next in 2026? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more fact-based countdowns like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.